There was a time when the price of an automobile wasn't measured only in numbers, but in prestige. In the 1960s, the United States was experiencing one of the most prosperous periods in its history. The economy was growing, highways were expanding, and the automobile had become much more than a means of transportation. It was a statement. But while most people were buying affordable family cars, some manufacturers in Detroit were building something completely different. Machines designed for those who wanted the very best money could buy. They combined luxury, power, innovation, and exclusivity during a decade when Detroit seemed to have no limits. And believe me, some of the prices you're about to see were so extreme for their time that even today they remain surprising. Let's begin. 1967, Cadillac Eldorado. If there was a car in the 1960s that perfectly represented American luxury taken to the limit, it was this one. By the middle of the decade, Cadillac had already become the name most closely associated with automotive prestige in the United States. Owning a Cadillac wasn't simply about having a big or comfortable car. It was a clear sign of success. But with the 1967 Eldorado, the brand decided to do something different. Instead of continuing with the huge traditional sedans, Cadillac created an entirely new luxury coupe. Much lower, wider, and visually far more modern than anything the brand had built before. The result was one of the most striking designs of the entire decade. The body is long, low, and extremely clean. The sharp front end, wide grille, and absence of excessive ornamentation gave it a presence that felt almost futuristic for 1967. It was a car that didn't try to look sporty, but it didn't need to. It simply communicated power and prestige. But the Eldorado wasn't just about appearance. It was also one of the most technologically advanced cars Detroit was offering at the time. And under the hood, there was more than enough power to support that presence. It carried the massive 429 cubic inch V8, capable of producing around 340 gross horsepower, making it one of the most powerful luxury coupes of its time. But all that luxury came at a price. In 1967, the Eldorado had a base price of approximately $6,277, an extremely high number for the era. Adjusted for inflation, that would be roughly equivalent to more than $60,000 today. It was, without question, one of the most expensive cars Cadillac offered during the decade. Today, that status still carries weight in the classic car market. A well-preserved example typically ranges between $15,000 and $30,000, with exceptional cars reaching even higher values. It wasn't simply another Cadillac. It was a statement of luxury, innovation, and confidence in a decade when Detroit seemed capable of building anything. 1963, Studebaker Avanti. Now, the list takes a completely unexpected turn, because the next car wasn't built by Cadillac, Chrysler, or any of the major powers of Detroit. It was built by Studebaker, and yet, it ended up becoming one of the most expensive and most advanced cars you could buy in the United States in the early 1960s. When it appeared, the Avanti seemed to come from another era. While most American manufacturers were still relying on heavy chrome, traditional proportions, and conservative silhouettes, Studebaker decided to take a risk. The result was one of the most futuristic designs of the entire decade. It was bold, it was modern, and above all, it was expensive. But part of that price was justified by the technology hidden beneath the surface. The body was constructed from fiberglass, something quite unusual for an American production car at the time. The Avanti also incorporated advanced safety ideas for the era, including front disc brakes and an interior designed with passenger protection in mind. However, the Avanti could also be surprisingly fast. In its most famous version, the Avanti R2, the car used a supercharged 289 cubic inch V8, capable of producing around 290 horsepower. For a car of its size in 1963, that was a very serious number. In fact, the Avanti set several speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats, reinforcing its reputation as something far more interesting than just a design experiment. But all that development came at a price. In 1963, a well-equipped Avanti could exceed $4,400, placing it firmly in luxury car territory and competing directly with models from much larger manufacturers. Adjusted for modern inflation, that equals roughly more than $45,000 today. And although Studebaker hoped the car would boost the brand's image, the reality was that production remained fairly limited. Between 1963 and 1964, just over 5,800 units were built, which today makes the Avanti one of the most intriguing and respected classics of the decade. Today, a well-preserved Studebaker Avanti typically ranges between $35,000 and $70,000, with especially rare or restored examples exceeding that range. 1969 Chevrolet Corvette L88. Now, the list changes tone completely, because if the cars we've seen so far were expensive due to luxury, technology, or prestige, the next one was expensive for a much simpler reason: power. The Corvette L88 wasn't designed to be comfortable, refined, or especially elegant. It was created with a much clearer objective: to offer the most extreme Corvette a customer could buy at the time. And that's exactly why it ended up being one of the most expensive cars of the entire decade. Visually, it didn't look very different from other late 1960s C3 Corvettes. It had the same aggressive body, the long hood, and the muscular lines that defined the generation. But beneath that familiar exterior was something far more serious. The L88 carried an extremely radical version of the 427 cubic inch big block V8, essentially designed for racing. Officially, Chevrolet rated the engine at 430 horsepower. But the reality was very different. Many experts believe the true output exceeded 500 horsepower, something absolutely brutal for a production car in 1969. But the L88 wasn't just a more powerful Corvette. To buy one, the customer had to accept a rather unusual list of equipment. The car included components intended for track use, stiffer suspension, heavy-duty cooling systems, and an overall setup far more focused on performance than comfort. In fact, it didn't even include a radio as standard equipment, because the idea was clear. This car was meant to be driven fast, not to listen to music. And that extreme character was also reflected in its price. In 1969, a Corvette L88 could easily exceed $7,000 depending on the configuration, a huge number for an American sports car at the time. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly more than $70,000 today. But the real factor that makes the L88 legendary is its production. In 1969, Chevrolet built only 116 units of the Corvette L88, making it one of the rarest and most desirable Corvettes ever produced. Today, that level of rarity has pushed its value into another league. An authentic 1969 Corvette L88 can easily exceed $1 million at auction, making it one of the most valuable American muscle cars ever built. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Among the three cars we've seen so far, the luxurious Cadillac Eldorado, the futuristic Studebaker Avanti, or the brutal Corvette L88, which one do you think is the most impressive of them all? Let me know in the comments, because what comes next takes us back into the territory of absolute American luxury. 1964, Imperial Crown Convertible. Now we return to the territory where the price of a car didn't just reflect power or innovation, but pure prestige. During the 1960s, Imperial wasn't simply another model within the Chrysler Group. It was its own brand, created specifically to compete with Cadillac and Lincoln at the very top of the American luxury market. And the Crown represented exactly that goal. Visually, the car projected authority from every angle. The body was enormous, long, and extremely elegant, with very clean, straight lines that reinforced the feeling of classic luxury. It didn't rely on extravagance or exaggerated styling. Its presence came from size, from proportions, and from the confidence it projected. The front end, with its separated headlights, wide grille, and massive body panels, created a car that seemed built for executives, diplomats, or buyers who wanted something even more exclusive than a Cadillac. But as expected in a car of this level, luxury wasn't the only thing it offered. Under the hood sat the powerful 413 cubic inch V8, capable of producing around 340 gross horsepower. It was a large, smooth engine, perfectly suited to move a luxury automobile of this size. The power wasn't dramatic or aggressive. It was steady, strong, and deeply refined. But all that luxury and size came at a price. In 1964, the Imperial Crown had a price close to $5,500, a very high number for the era. Adjusted for modern inflation, that equals roughly more than $55,000 today. And, as often happens with truly exclusive luxury cars, production was very limited. In 1964, Chrysler built only about 922 Imperial Crown convertibles, making it one of the rarest luxury convertibles of the entire decade. Today, that level of exclusivity has turned the Imperial into a highly respected collector's piece among enthusiasts of classic American luxury. A well-preserved example typically ranges between $15,000 and $35,000, depending on condition and originality. 1965, Pontiac GTO. Now, the list changes direction once again, because the next car wasn't expensive because of extreme luxury or handcrafted exclusivity. It was expensive for something that was beginning to dominate the 1960s: pure performance. Today, it's easy to forget how radical this car was when it first appeared. In the early 1960s, most American coupes were still focused on comfort, size, and presence. But Pontiac decided to do something different. They took a relatively affordable car, the Tempest, and installed a massive engine normally reserved for much larger models. The result was the birth of one of the first true muscle cars in history. Visually, it kept fairly clean and balanced lines. It wasn't exaggerated or dramatic like some later muscle cars. But the real story wasn't in the body. It was under the hood. The GTO used the famous 389 cubic inch V8, which in its most powerful configurations could produce up to 360 gross horsepower with the tri-power system of 3 carburetors. For the mid-1960s, that figure made the GTO surprisingly fast. Although the GTO wasn't the most expensive car on this list in absolute terms, a well-equipped example could easily exceed $4,000 in 1965, especially when ordered with high-performance options. That placed it clearly above many family cars of the time. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly more than $40,000 in today's money. But what's interesting is that, unlike many expensive cars on this list, the GTO was produced in relatively high numbers. In 1965, Pontiac built more than 75,000 units of the GTO, proving that the market was more than ready for this new kind of American automobile. Today, that historical status keeps it highly valued among collectors. A well-preserved 1965 Pontiac GTO typically ranges between $50,000 and $100,000, with especially rare or restored examples easily exceeding that range. It wasn't the most luxurious car on this list, but it was one of the cars that completely changed the direction of the American automobile. 1966, Oldsmobile Toronado. Now we arrive at one of the most interesting and expensive on cars of the entire decade. Not because of extravagance, but because of engineering. When it appeared, this car represented something very unusual in Detroit, a genuine technological gamble. While most manufacturers were still relying on the traditional formula of front engine and rear-wheel drive, Oldsmobile decided to do something completely different. The Toronado introduced front-wheel drive to a large American production coupe, something almost no one expected to see in a car of this size and class. And that completely changed how the car felt on the road. Visually, the Toronado also looked different. The long, low front end, the pronounced wheel arches, and the sharp body lines created a design that felt more modern and more technical than many of its competitors. Under the hood sat the massive 425 cubic inch Rocket 5.8, capable of producing around 385 gross horsepower. An impressive figure for a luxury car in the mid-1960s. And thanks to its innovative front-wheel drive system, all that power was delivered in a way very different from what American drivers were used to. But all that innovation came at a price. In 1966, the Toronado had a base price of around $4,600, placing it firmly in the upper segment of the American market. Adjusted for inflation, that equals roughly more than $45,000 today. A well-preserved 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado typically ranges between $20,000 and $50,000, with exceptional examples reaching even higher values. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Among the last 3 cars we've seen, the elegant Imperial Crown Convertible, the revolutionary Pontiac GTO, or the innovative Oldsmobile Toronado. Which one do you think is the most interesting of them all? Let me know in the comments. Because what comes next takes us back into the territory of executive American luxury. 1968, Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. Now we return to one of the most classic territories of American luxury. If the Eldorado represented Cadillac's more modern and stylish side in the 1960s, the Fleetwood Brougham represented the exact opposite. Traditional American luxury taken to its highest level. This was not a car designed to look sporty or futuristic. It was a car built to project authority. Visually, it had an enormous presence. The body was long, very square, and extremely elegant. It was the kind of car that seemed to dominate the road simply because of its size. But what truly separated the Fleetwood from the rest of the Cadillac lineup was its level of refinement. The Fleetwood division was responsible for the brand's most luxurious models, and the Brougham was designed for customers who wanted the very best Cadillac could offer in terms of comfort, materials, and presence. The interior was filled with luxury details, wide seats, wood trim, chrome accents, and a build quality that made every trip feel almost like traveling in a rolling living room. And although comfort was the main focus, Cadillac didn't neglect power. Under the hood sat the massive 472 cubic inch V8, one of the largest engines Cadillac had produced at that time. This engine generated around 375 gross horsepower, delivering smooth but impressive thrust for a car of this size. But, as expected, all that luxury came at a price. In 1968, the Fleetwood Brougham had a price close to $6,500, placing it clearly among the most expensive Cadillacs offered during the decade. Adjusted for inflation, that equals roughly more than $65,000 today. It was a car built for a very specific clientele, and today, that status keeps it one of the most respected Cadillacs of its era. A well-preserved 1968 Cadillac, Fleetwood Brougham typically ranges between $15,000 and $40,000, with exceptional examples reaching higher values among collectors of classic American luxury. 1969 Buick Riviera GS. When Buick introduced the Riviera at the beginning of the decade, the objective was clear. They didn't want to compete directly with the enormous luxury sedans from Cadillac or Lincoln. They wanted to create something different, a personal luxury car. A car that was elegant, powerful, and had a presence unlike anything else on the road. And by the late 1960s, that formula had been fully refined. Visually, it is one of the most balanced coupes Buick produced during the entire decade. The body is long and very clean, with an elegant roofline, and an aggressive front end with hidden headlights that gave it a more modern appearance than many of its rivals. It didn't look like a muscle car, but it also wasn't just a luxury car. It was a very interesting combination of both. But when the Grand Sport version appeared, the story changed completely. Under the hood of the Riviera, GS was the massive 430 cubic inch V8, capable of producing around 360 gross horsepower. It was a large engine with enormous torque, turning this elegant coupe into a surprisingly fast car for its size. But that level of refinement and performance also came at a price. In 1969, a well-equipped Riviera could easily exceed $5,000, especially in GS form. Adjusted for inflation, that equals roughly more than $50,000 today. Today, that balance between elegant design and respectable power has made it one of the brand's most appreciated classics. A well-preserved Buick Riviera GS typically ranges between $20,000 and $50,000, with especially original examples reaching even higher values at auctions. 1969 Dodge Charger RT. Now we arrive at one of the most recognizable names of the entire muscle car era. When people talk about expensive cars in the 1960s, the conversation often focuses on luxury. But the reality is that by the end of the decade, some of the most powerful cars Detroit was producing could also reach surprisingly high prices, especially when ordered with the most extreme configurations, and the Charger RT was a perfect example of that. Visually, the 1969 model is considered by many to be one of the most successful designs of the entire muscle car era. The long, flowing fastback silhouette combined with the full hidden grille gave it a presence that was aggressive but also elegant. But the real character of the Charger appeared when you looked under the hood. The RT version was designed for buyers who wanted the most serious Charger possible. As standard, it already included the powerful 440 Magnum V8, capable of producing around 375 gross horsepower. That alone was enough to make the car highly respected on the street. But for customers who wanted something even more extreme, Dodge offered an option that has since become legendary: the 426 Hemi. This massive V8 officially produced 425 horsepower, although many experts believe the real output was significantly higher. Naturally, adding engines like the 440, along with performance and equipment options, quickly increased the car's price. A well-equipped 1969 Charger RT could easily approach $4,500 or even $5,000, placing it clearly among the most expensive cars in the muscle car world of the time. Adjusted for inflation, that equals roughly more than $50,000 today. But what has truly driven its value over time is its cultural status. Today, a well-preserved Dodge Charger typically ranges between $70,000 and $140,000, while rare examples equipped with the Hemi engine can easily exceed $250,000 in the collector market. 1963 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz. And now, we arrive at the car that closes this list, and also the one that best represents the true meaning of extreme luxury in 1960s America: the Eldorado Biarritz. For decades, the Eldorado name had been reserved for some of the most exclusive automobiles Cadillac could offer. But in the early 1960s, the brand decided to push that idea even further. Visually, it is one of the most refined Cadillacs ever produced. The lines are clean, long, and perfectly balanced. Unlike the excesses of the late 1950s, the design here feels more mature, more sophisticated, and much more confident. The low front end, the wide chrome grille, and the monumental proportions create a presence that communicates luxury from every angle. It doesn't need exaggeration. It simply looks expensive. And in convertible form, that elegance becomes even more evident. But Cadillac understood that prestige also needed to be backed up by power. Under the hood sat the 390 cubic inch V8, capable of producing around 325 gross horsepower. A smooth and powerful engine, perfectly suited to move this large luxury convertible with authority. It wasn't a car designed to compete with muscle cars. It was a car designed to dominate the road with elegance. But all that luxury came at a price. And it wasn't small. In 1963, the Eldorado Biarritz had a base price of about $7,401, making it one of the most expensive cars a customer could buy in the United States during that decade. To put that into perspective, many family cars at the time cost less than half that amount. Adjusted for inflation, that price would be roughly equivalent to more than $75,000 today. It was a car reserved for a very specific clientele: successful businessmen, celebrities, and buyers who wanted the highest level of prestige Detroit could offer. Today, that status is still reflected in the classic car market. A well-preserved 1963 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz typically ranges between about $50,000 and $100,000, depending on condition, with exceptional examples selling for considerably more among collectors. It wasn't the fastest car of the 1960s, nor the most radical, but it was one of the automobiles that best represented what American luxury meant when price truly wasn't the main concern. After exploring all these cars, one thing becomes very clear. In the 1960s, the price of a car wasn't defined only by engine size or the amount of chrome on the body. The price reflected something much bigger: prestige, innovation, and industrial ambition. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Of all the cars we've seen today, the elegant Cadillac Eldorado, the futuristic Studebaker Avanti, the brutal Corvette L88, or the imposing Imperial Crown, which one would you choose as the most impressive American car of the 1960s? Let me know in the comments, because it's always fascinating to see which of these machines wins over true enthusiasts. And if you enjoyed this journey through the most expensive cars of the 1960s, make sure to watch the video now appearing on screen, where we explore the most expensive American cars of the 1950s, a time when automotive luxury reached almost unbelievable levels, with cars that cost as much as a house, and that today have become true icons of classic American design. Click the video, continue the journey through the golden age of the automobile, and I'll see you in the next one.